Hey, autoimmune warriors, welcome to the Stronger Than Autoimmune podcast. I am so fired up for you to be here. If you're navigating life with an autoimmune condition, you're in the right place. I am your host, Des, and I am not just a podcaster. I am right here in the trenches with you as a fellow autoimmune warrior. We're diving into real, uplifting stories and some seriously smart expert tips and simple lifestyle tweaks that can make a difference in how we feel day to day. Now I've got to give a huge shout out to my amazing listeners. You're the heartbeat of this podcast, and I'm so grateful for you tuning in. If you're loving the vibes, here is how you can keep the love flowing. Drop a rating on Spotify, share a quick review on Apple, or pass this episode along to a warrior buddy who can use a boost of hope. Here are some patients that are killing it for our community. Workers with Autoimmune Ailments Alliance. These folks are fighting the good fight for students and workers like us with autoimmune conditions. Want to get involved or learn more? Swing by WAAA.org. They'll love to have you. Leap Cure. They're all about hooking up patients with cutting-edge clinical trials and putting our voices front and center. Check them out at leapcure.com. Adapt Naturals by Chris Kresser. They offer nutrient-packed supplements based on science. Snag 20% off your first order with my code DEZ, D-E-Z, at Adapt Naturals. From my heart to yours, I'm sending you nothing but love and good vibes. Let's dive in together. Thank you so much, autoimmune warriors. Meet Anu Simh, a vibrant, board-certified functional health coach and founder of 9 Arms of Wellness. Based in sunny La Jolla, California, Anu empowers busy women nationwide to shed pounds and thrive by focusing on gut health. Her unique approach has transformed hundreds of lives, and she is now training other coaches in her proven methodology. A passionate plant-based chef, Anu's upcoming book, Flourish From Within, blends gut health wisdom with over 50 delicious recipes. Her mission? To help people ditch lifestyle disease meds through diet and lifestyle magic. So thank you so much, Anu.
Thank you, Desiree. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. So I'm wondering, I read a little bit about you. You had perimenopause, bloating, fatigue, and doctors really didn't help you. They kind of dismissed you, and then you fell into learning more about gut health. With your background in organic chemistry and Ayurveda and holistic nutrition, what sparked your passion in helping women with autoimmune issues through your 9 Arms of Wellness program?
Thank you. That's a great question. I kind of just reminds me, it's funny, when you are well, you forget when you were not, because you just take it for granted. But there was a time when I couldn't take this for granted. I couldn't take just walking into the kitchen and eating just anything and not thinking about it. And of course, my kitchen doesn't have anything unhealthy, but even the very healthy foods like, let's say beans or veggies and things like that were such a big challenge for me at that time. And one of the reasons the doctors couldn't help me was because they didn't know a lot. They were confused, and we are every day, there's more and more research coming our ways. When I was going through all of these problems and really trying to figure out what is going on in my system and finding the microbiome, falling in love with it. When I had started learning about the microbiome, we didn't have as much research as we do today. Today, you open PubMed, oh my gosh, there's tons and tons of studies about how microbiome is connected to autoimmune conditions, to weight gain, to your immune health, to type 2 diabetes, the gut brain, you name it. It's really hard to miss it, So we are in a very different world today. And in spite of that, 2 out of 3 Americans have not heard the word microbiome. So all of this put together became my kind of a passion for me to teach people about the microbiome, about optimal wellness and why That is our birthright.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for diving into and using yourself as a testimonial that we can be healthy as we get older.
Yeah.
Because many women that get autoimmune disease are in that they it's triggered with stress or because they got older and they're in their 40s and just life happens and they
Yeah.
get autoimmune disease. So it is very important for us to talk about how to take care of ourselves, especially in that transition phase, and for the younger generation, how to take care, how to prevent it, but also what will happen and how to prevent those problems.
Right. And I think as far as age, I mean, you're right. Menopausal women do struggle with autoimmune conditions a lot. I see that in my practice. But even younger women do. Definitely connected. The Western microbiome and autoimmunity are so connected. Study after study today is showing that, I mean, there's a 3 to 9% increase in these diseases every year. And that we can't say it's because of genetics. So there's something else going on, and that something is that gut health. In fact, there was a study that came out, I think, last year that showed that as your microbial diversity decreases, that increases autoimmunity because of our environment, because of the modern way of living, because of the processed foods, ultra processed foods. And all of that is creating such a havoc in our lives. And I think we need to start younger, young women, largely women, but I have men too who struggle with Hashi, for example, or RA. Yes, and I think we need to have a good conversation about how this modern life is affecting us.
Absolutely. Stretching it out into categories of how this happens is the stress, the processed foods, poor sleep. How do these factors disrupt the microbiome and drive issues like inflammation and weight
Yeah.
gain?
Yeah. So first of all, let's start with ultra processed foods, right? And what is in ultra processed foods? We don't. There's usually sugar, there's salt, there's some kind of fat, or there's a refined carbohydrate. You don't find many ultra processed foods with that are high in protein or fiber. Because first of all, protein is more expensive. It's also the hyperpalatability of a food comes from that sugar, salt, and fat. So, and when our bodies are inundated with that, our microbes are like at a loss because they have, evolutionary speaking, they've evolved with us to really look to fiber as their fuel source. So when we are not feeding them foods that are high in fiber, it really affects the diversity. And microbial diversity is so connected with that increase in autoimmunity. So, right there, gut health. And because think about it, 70% of our immune system is in our gut. And they're like telling the immune system, hey, this is a friend, this is a foe, this is a neutral party, don't react. So when that diversity of the microbes decreases, what happens? The immune system does not get that signal. So the immune tolerance decreases. And when immune tolerance decreases, more of these kind of factors happen because these bad actors, a pathogenic bacterial load increases and they just start sending more toxins like lipopolysaccharides into our bloodstream. Full on inflammation happens, explodes. And when there's that chronic inflammation, that can cause more of these disease patterns. And so it's a constant vicious cycle that happens. And right there, if we would just look at modern foods and say, what if we replace these with whole foods? That could be a starting point.
Yeah.
And you had a good point about stress and sleep. Both affect the microbiome. Sleep, even one night of poor sleep can decrease the microbial diversity. And of course, stress. We all know how cortisol can play a huge role.
Yeah, thank you for going over each one of those and how one night of sleep can really destroy all the hard work and that we really need to honor our sleep.
Yeah. And it's hard because, we all have situations where we need to, students have to pull all nighters. I was writing this book and there were nights where I couldn't go to sleep before midnight. But I will tell you this, Desiree, the next day, for sure, my brain was not looking for broccoli. I was
And
hunting. I was like, where's all the fun stuff in this house, you know?
Can you talk about that? Can you talk
Yeah.
about why that happens to why we crave bad food when
Well, first of all, the brain is thinking that it's trained to look at these foods as they're hyper palatable. They make our brain feel kind of relaxed. There's that dopamine response from that food. And the food industry is really smart. They know that this combination of foods is enough to get the brain excited about it. And the brain feels good on it. So that kind of feedback loop from the brain saying, have a little bit more of this, have that donut, you're going to feel really good. But we're not thinking beyond that 2 minutes of feeling good, because we'll need more and more of it to feel even better, right? So I know a lot of people say this is very addictive. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say it's like cocaine or something like that, but it's addictive enough that we want more. I mean, I don't think any of us have opened a bag of chips and said, I'm just going to have one. If you point me to that person, I would say, wow, all kudos to you. I don't think I can never do that. You know, I open a bag of chips, it's gone. You know, it's like, so you've got to know your own limits. You need to know how your brain responds to these foods and kind of go from there. Food industry says, well, we didn't know about that this was what was happening. And I'm like, hogwash, you know? Of course you knew. People who should be taking responsibility are not taking the responsibility. So it really falls upon us as consumers to say, how do I feed my body?
yeah, going back it feels so good in the moment that we forget that, okay, well, a day later, 30 minutes later, depends on the person. How am I really going to feel? And you forget about that and we don't know how to address that. I mean,
It's very hard because even like, for example, going back to sleep, one night of poor sleep, studies have shown, can make you eat up to 500 calories more the next day from these hyperpalatable foods. And so your caloric intake increases. You're not getting enough fiber or protein. So when you're not eating adequate protein, which is really, which increases satiety, you're constantly looking for more and more because your body is looking for nourishment. And if you're not nourishing your body with protein, with good fiber, with good fats, in fact, I tell my clients, I give them like a food addiction scale just to see where they are in their journey. And everyone's different, of course, but the person who's kind of like me has sort of addictive personality, maybe for them it's anything with too much sugar and flour should be a no-no for some time, just like you would do with alcohol, right? I mean, why do we have like 1 month of being alcohol free? Because you can't be one day say, oh, I'm just going to do one day and hope that it's all going to work out, because it affects the same part of the brain. So it's really important to not blame ourselves for lack of willpower. It is just the way these foods are made. It's made to get us.
yeah. Another reason I really find this conversation good because I've been there. When you're a teenager, when you're young, eat really the American way. The Cokes, the chips, the Cheetos, all those foods, and you don't realize. You get into that style pattern of eating when you're young, and you don't really feel a difference. You lose sleep, you don't feel a difference. But it's easy to recover. And then as you get older, you think, well, what's going on? Why am I,
Mhm.
what has changed? Why am I so different? Why do I have autoimmune disease? Why have I gained weight? And how do you talk about that assessment, find out where clients are at when you're coaching them with that
Well,
addiction or with that assessment you're talking about?
that's a good question. And so if a client comes in and they're saying, I'm eating the same way. I don't know what's going on with me. I just can't seem to lose the weight. That could be a question, right? I mean, that's usually perimenopause that's happening. So the rules of the game have changed. You no longer are able to do that pizza at 1 a.m. and recover from it the next day. We've all been there. So what's happening hormonally? Your estrogen tanks, your progesterone tanks, your cortisol, which, I mean, cortisol is a good hormone when it's in the adequate amounts. So If you are stressed, you are going to end up storing a lot more fat in the belly area. So that could be another problem. It could be an insulin resistance problem, especially with autoimmunity. And depending on what kind of autoimmunity, there are different kinds. I largely get women with Hashis, sometimes with RA, sometimes lupus. These are the three that I see the most. And they all have very different fingerprints as far as their microbial patterns. For example, someone with rheumatoid arthritis may have a bacteria called Prevotella copri, and they may have a lot of that, and that could even trigger RA. So some of the new research is pointing to that. Someone with Hashimoto's could have that low short chain fatty acid, low butyrate, high inflammation, things like that. Lupus, for example, you see that the bacteria, because of that leaky gut situation, the entire bacteria can sometimes go into the bloodstream, not just the bacterial remnants. So all of these patterns are showing us that the microbiome is so connected with autoimmunity. So what is the starting point for this?
I was just about to ask that.
Yeah. So if someone comes in, I'm very curious. I said, "Do you want to learn more about your microbiome?" So we start with a test. Looks at your feces. When you look at the fecal matter, you can see the bugs in there, and they're a true representation of what's happening in your distal colon. So we're able to find out what kind of diversity is in your microbiome, what kind of functions are they doing? Are they doing all the functions that they are supposed to be doing? And when I say functions, I mean, Desiree, like producing short chain fatty acids, butyrate, that decrease inflammation, that help you in so many multitude of ways, producing vitamins, having producing neurotransmitters like serotonin, your happy hormone. These bugs, when they're diverse and robust in your microbiome, they're able to do all of these functions. So a test could give me a starting point. It's not diagnostic by any nature, but it's a functional analysis test. I get them excited about learning, hey, this is what's happening. And other things like usually it's insulin resistance. They really they struggle with their A1C, with your up and down, erratic blood sugar. That could be another reason. And sometimes, largely, people come to me because they've gained weight and they want to lose it. It's that yo yo weight gain. So I explain to them that yo yo weight gain is also connected to the microbiome. So when they see all these connections, they make a decision that, okay, this is where I want to start. I want to start with food. Then I want to focus on sleep. And of course, this could be very different for someone who's so stressed out, is probably already on an SSRI, really struggling with stress. Maybe his sleep is really poor. It doesn't make sense to start with a diet. You're probably so exhausted with all the restrictive diets they've been on that I think for someone like that, I usually say, which would be a better place for you? Would it be better for you to start with diet or maybe some stress busters to kind of relax the nervous system before we jump into anything? I think we as coaches, we're just there to guide them to take the next step.
Yeah. What are they ready for?
Yeah.
So we talked about how ultra-processed foods hurt the microbiome. Since you coming from a organic chemistry background, how do these better or microorganisms, bacteria, help with autoimmunity and doing the right processes? I know you said butyrate, polysaccharides. How do they actually do that? Other ones not good for us.
My feeling is, how much are you going to focus on the bad players, the bad actors? One of the questions I ask myself is, why are they even present? And the answer is usually when there's low diversity. So the first thing to really get comfortable with about the microbiome is the definition of a healthy microbiome. There is no standard definition so far. Nobody knows, because your gut microbiome could be very different from mine, but we could equally have healthy microbiomes. So that totally depends on, are they doing their functions? So the better question to ask is, do you have a resilient microbiome? And a resilient microbiome is a microbiome that bounces back after, let's say, antibiotics or food poisoning or maybe a travel to Mexico or something like that. I mean, we've all had experiences, right? Some people can eat street food, have your corn on the cob, and completely survive it, and others have the runs, really struggle, then they need to take antibiotics. So that circles back to having a resilient microbiome. And so the definition for a resilient microbiome is a microbiome that has species richness. You have different kinds of species that do a lot of different jobs for you. And the other thing is species evenness. You don't want one bacteria that is just kind of outgrows and just crushes everything else. Just like maybe 100 tomato plants, one zucchini plant. Species evenness and species richness. I see the person kind of bounces back. They're able to handle different scenarios in their life. And I had bought into completely I guess the word would be convenience that the American life gives you, right? Just fast food. Let's move on to more important things like work. And so I did a lot of that. And initially it was fine. But as I got older, it started affecting me. And I noticed that my gut was not bouncing back from these excursions. What is happening? So I was largely losing diversity. I was probably feeding, mono eating. We all do that, right? We mono eat. We have like 4 veggies that we like or one protein that we go to. And so the gut doesn't like that. The microbes don't like that. They want diversity in our food. So one of the things that I teach is how do we increase diversity, and that diversity is coming from the plant kingdom. It's not coming from which protein you choose because our microbes haven't evolved to digest protein. Most of the digestion of protein is happening in the upper digestive systems, the stomach, and all of that. So by the time your food reaches the colon, most of the protein is digested. Unless you're eating way too much protein than you need to, or you're not digesting the protein. So some of it could make its way into the colon. The downside to that is they also produce some toxic metabolites from having digested the protein, like ammonia, like hydrogen sulfide, polyamines, things like that, that can hurt our bodies. So the question the listener might be thinking is, oh, does this mean I don't eat animal protein? No, that's not the answer. The answer is have your animal protein or any kind of protein, but also find things in the plate to feed your microbiome. So that is
Yeah.
your fiber rich foods, like different
Yeah, like the vegetables,
rainbow
the fruit.
fruits, beans, lentils, and someone with Hashi or who's has like a leaky gut, a compromised gut permeability will struggle to eat beans and lentils initially because they don't have the players in their gut who are really good at breaking them down. But with time, they will. So it's a slow and steady thing. It's not like, oh, have 40 grams of fiber today. That's not going to work. Probably come and kill me.
And where do you start with people like, oh, I don't eat vegetables, I only eat fruit? How do you help them grow their biodiversity? Because you said, usually people only like broccoli with cheese on it, but one of those ones that are standard that you see on the menu at any big chain restaurant, it's usually broccoli, it's usually cauliflower or carrots, and that's it with cheese on it probably.
Yeah.
How do you help them open up their minds to different
Yeah.
vegetables?
So that's where the education comes in. It's very crucial. They first need to understand the why. Why are you eating these veggies? Because you've probably always been told, eat your broccoli, I'll give you a candy. So I think a lot of this starts with our messages that we give our children. Food is fuel, food is medicine, needs to start very early in life. There's a certain responsibility that a young person adopts towards food. They not only think of it as, wow, this I need to eat well because I need to take care of my health, but they also feel that kind of relationship with their microbes because there's certainly a symbiotic partnership between the microbes. We could not survive without them, without these microbes. So the more we grow them and make sure that they're healthy, we're healthy. So just imagine if we had that conversation with our young minds, children who are just learning and they're so curious. They love learning about these kind of things. That sort of curiosity and that just only a child will ask questions like that, right? That's a perfect age to start changing this conversation so they don't have to go through what we did. For someone who's addicted to those kinds of foods, making just eating veggies and things like that a procedural habit, like, oh, that's part of what I do, it's going to take some time, So I think the first step is, if they're feeling so poorly and they're willing to do anything to take action, then introducing the idea and the concept of just let's look at everything that's happening in your body, and can we connect the immune system and gut health to your autoimmunity, to your type 2 diabetes.
Totally. Yeah. It's a totally different conversation when people come in willing and
Yeah.
wanting.
Yeah. So that's an easy one, right? That stage of change, they're already at, and I'm taking action stage of change. We just take them from where they are to where they want to go, but it becomes a very personal journey.
Yeah. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. Draw from your Ayurveda, vegan, paleo diets to use food as medicine. How do you help these people that have autoimmune disease and they're totally overwhelmed?
Yeah. Well, like, a lot of my clients have already tried every diet: restrictive diets, autoimmune, paleo, vegan, vegetarian, keto. So I feel like, first of all, respecting the client and saying, what is it that you want? What do you see as a lifestyle? What do you see as sustainable in your life? That needs to be very clear, right? I can't just say, I think a plant forward diet is going to help you, or increasing more protein is going to be the answer. Because, I mean, who knows if they're going to respond to that? So I get a lot of information from the client and understand their cultural affinity to a diet, or maybe what they grew up with. And then once that's clear, then I find the best possible diet within that cuisine or label to help them. I just point the research to them, but ultimately the decision is theirs, what to do. Same thing with vegans. Some people are vegans for ethical reasons, carbon footprint, and now they want to also bring in the health aspect to it. Maybe they're already seeing some difference with their vegan style, but they're feeling tired, or so I open that conversation about, and saying, okay, how much protein are you getting? Are you getting enough adequate protein? Are you making sure there's all of the 9 essential amino acids? Totally possible on a plant-based diet, but are they doing it? Because you can be on any diet, but it can be unhealthy, or it can be healthy. So that becomes more of the conversation, I think.
Yeah. And it depends on, like you said, the client and what they enjoy. And you're
Yeah.
trying to modify their diet
Yeah.
within what they find nourishing for them. I know dopamine, like we were talking about, dopamine influences cravings anytime, especially. How do you help? You mentioned you have a highly addictive personality. So how do you help somebody with a highly addictive personality to change that up?
Yeah. So the coaching is really, that's where reframing the mindset. So my program is based on a protocol I call MBHR. M stands for microbiome. B is the brain, H is a hormone, and R is reframing the mindset. This is what I teach my coaches as well. And so microbiome is top, number one. Brain is where all of that dopamine, thing is happening. And that's where the food addiction scale is important. We have honest conversations. And I give them two scenarios. Do you want this to be a lifestyle, or are you looking to lose weight at the next 3 months, and are you okay with the yo-yo weight gain? Because if you're done with 3 months and you lose the weight, go to your wedding or whatever it is the 3 month weight loss is about, but then you start gaining the weight back, we've got to ask the question, why? Why is that happening? Why are you gaining the weight back? Because 80% of people who lose weight gain it back. And it could be different reasons. So if that is what is happening, then I laid out very early in the game. I said, listen, this is what your score says about you. I have a similar personality, and a lot of us do. I mean, we just have our different varying degrees of that kind of addiction. What do you see in your future life when I open the door and you're out on your own in 3 or 6 months, when you've lost the weight you want to, and you want to manage and maintain that weight? What do you see as an ideal situation for you? How much of this palatable, hyperpalatable foods do you really want as part of your life? And I think that's a very important question, because I don't think I can go through life without eating pizza. I love pizza, right? I mean, so I have to find how was that going to fit into my healthy eating mantra. So we usually make a decision. They'll say, I want to be healthy 70% of the time, 30% is with my girlfriends, with my family. I want to eat or drink or whatever. So we come up with ideas around that. And we also find solutions for what happens when they just blow up their diet and what happens the next day. So when they have these little tools and a system for what happens post that eating thing, then they feel more comfortable. But if that was a one off thing, I really enjoyed the pizza. But today I'm going to do this, this, and this to track my health back. That's a more doable thing, I think, than having this very, I don't know, this mantra that I'm never going to eat something. I think it works for
It's
very,
not realistic.
it's not realistic, works for very few people.
Yeah. We talked about all different things. We talked about autoimmunity. We talked about addiction. We talked about high palatable foods and what they do to the brain. And I would like to circle back to autoimmunity and how somebody like the psychological and the gut and the mental state go back and forth with, especially with autoimmunity. But how can you heal that, and how do you, I mean, everybody knows, well, maybe I shouldn't say that everybody knows, but there's a mind brain connection. And how do you see that changing when you start working with somebody that has autoimmune disease?
Wow, that's a pretty layered answer. I wouldn't even know where to begin with the gut brain axis because it is so client led. There are Hashi clients or lupus clients who are so drained. They've tried everything and they're just so exhausted. And for them, and they've tried everything, right? Those little miracle cures. Have 1 teaspoon of this and you're going to get better, to going to several doctors. So it's quite the spectrum. And then they come and I'm offering them very simple solutions. First is disbelief. It's like, are you kidding? I've tried all of this, it doesn't work. How is this going to work? Our brain looks for a system. We need a system. You can't really go after a goal when you don't have a system to support the goal. So if the goal is to heal from that autoimmunity, I mean, it's always there, but not having flare ups of lupus or RA or something like that, then we need to understand what is causing the flare ups. So the education of, maybe RA has this high Prevotella microbiome, and maybe that is coming from the kind of foods that you're choosing, and giving that kind of background of what's happening at a gut and immune level, and then connecting it to the gut brain. Some people come in and they're so anxious because of, and I don't know which came first, if it's the gut issues that cause the brain issues or the other way around. But I readily see the anxiety, like even before they say, I have a gut issue. I might ask them, do you have this and this, based on how they present as a client with the anxiety and stuff. So if that is the case, then keeping them relaxed, helping them with your nervous system, maybe doing breath work, and doing some meditation, yoga nidra, and really talking to them about the circadian rhythm and sleep. And this is where Ayurveda comes in. It's very handy because it's a lifestyle medicine. So if someone comes in and they have erratic eating and sleeping habits, they don't follow the season as far as eating, they're eating, let's say, mangoes in just the middle of winter, that's a good starting point, and say, hey, this is what this Eastern medicine or Chinese medicine says. What do you think about that? Do you feel like there's a connection? And then teach them about circadian rhythms and sleep. And the microbes have their own circadian rhythm, and it's very closely mimics ours. So if our circadian rhythm is off, we're eating all times in night, it's going to affect their diversity as well. And that low diversity causes more of that leaky gut. And leaky gut really means almost across the board, most of these people with autoimmunity, they're high in zonulin. And when they are high in zonulin, that increases that intestinal permeability. So that could be a starting point to the conversation. Where do we start with repairing the gut, and then give them some ideas on where to start. And largely it's because they're either on very restrictive diets because anything that they eat is causing them havoc. And that's driving more and more of that immune tolerance going down and increasing those flare ups. So, really having that, as a starting point of the conversation helps with most people.
Yeah. It sounds like you read a lot with your clients and trying to figure out what works for them. If you were to give a generalized tip for the listeners, because I know you just mentioned that some people are surprised that your starting place is so simple that they don't believe it's going to work. Can you share some simple ideas or maybe one or two that can help the broad audience?
If it is someone who's listening in and who's struggling with autoimmunity, I would say really kind of take a look at their gluten consumption, wheat especially, and try to just really kind of pay attention to that because there seems to be a connection. Any foods that are cross reactive with that, like soy or milk, I mean, dairy and things like that. That would be one. Number two would be slowly increasing fiber. The more diverse your microbiome is, the less of those flare ups, and you're going to tighten your, leaky gut. You're going to have more of that, a stronger immune tolerance and oral tolerance. And sometimes that would mean something very simple, like starting with like a smoothie. And a lot of people like, oh, a smoothie, that feels like so basic. But you need basic things to start the journey, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and the it could be an anti-inflammatory kind of smoothie. Does not have to be something that's high in your glycemic load and things like that. Making sure it has adequate protein, making sure it has good fats, and making sure it's got a lot of the micronutrients, polyphenols that are in turn going to help your gut heal. So that could be a starting point for anyone can do that.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And would you mind sharing one of your recipes from your book, Flourish From Within?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll share one that my clients have loved over the years, and that's like they call it the Anu lunch, like a play on my name, Anu lunch. It's I give them a format. Say, listen, if you're a busy girl, you have so much on your plate. If you have to sit there and figure out recipes and stuff, it's not going to be sustainable. What if we just start with a format? And the format really says start with a base of greens, and bitter greens to get your liver really excited with detoxification pathways, and some good beta glucan sources like mushrooms and things like that. Add the enhancers in, add some good starchy vegetables if you can handle it, and find a protein source that you like. It could be chicken, it could be turkey, it could be, if you can handle tofu, that's fine. Just add those things and find a beautiful salad dressing for it. And I give them some choices of salad dressings and extra virgin olive oil, apple cider vinegar. These are all great. Apple cider vinegar, for example, has shown that it really cuts down on postprandial spikes in blood sugar. Almost every client who comes to me is struggling with blood sugar balance. So that would be a good add in. And extra virgin olive oil is really high in polyphenols. So adding those two into your salad, making it really yummy, and the brain is happy. When you look at a volumetrically rich, big bowl of something, your brain immediately relaxes and your satiety goes up. And because it's so high in fiber, and fiber is one of those natural GLP-1, things that really increases satiety, your brain is happy, your hormones are happy, you're going to be happy too. You'll make that salad work for you. And that could mean many things, right? Some people like a little bit of cheese in it. And if you can handle the cheese, and or just croutons or some crunch factor or some pumpkin seeds. But if you do this daily, and then let's say in 2 months, you cannot think of your life without it. It's going to be like brushing your teeth. Your lunch is going to be spot on, or your morning is going to be spot on because one meal has become very, very healthy. Then who cares about the rest of the day? At least your starting point has been so good, it sets the day for better things. And that's great for when you start out. You don't have to say, my entire day has to be perfect.
Yeah.
I've very rarely seen it happen. All the clients I have helped over the years, I would say I have maybe have two or three clients who were like, nope, I'm going to, I mean, for the 8 weeks, they didn't budge from the program. But the rest of us mortals, we just, well, how about tomorrow, So that's, yeah, you've got to be flexible.
Yeah.
Life teaches us that, right? It's a journey. It's not,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing so much information. And I think that's a wrap on today's episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed the conversation with you. And I'm inspired by the wisdom and the gut health information you've given us to nourish our bodies, especially for us autoimmune warriors. And I want to remind everybody to, if you don't know where to start with recipes, please look for Flourish From Within. Sounds like it's good recipes that are not complicated to help take the stress out, and you're giving us practical tips. So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
You're
And
so welcome, Desiree. So yeah, the book is going to be available where all books are sold. And it's a book about the microbiome and simple language and a diet that I propose that you can add on to the diet that you're already on. And finally, some recipes. And my website is ninearmsofwellness.com.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guess who I just connected with, warriors? Leap Cure. Leap what? Leap Cure. Leap Cure connects patients with clinical trials to make research more equitable and efficient. Listen to their latest clinical trial.
If you've been diagnosed with thyroid eye disease and are seeking potential new treatment options, you might be interested in the LIDS clinical trial. If you're 18 and over, have a diagnosis of Graves' disease or Hashimoto's, and are interested in potentially participating in research, you can fill out a short questionnaire at lpcur.com/TED. You'll be connected with someone on the team to determine whether it might be a good fit for you. Check your eligibility and learn more at lpcur.com/TED.